I didn't know a jacket could feel heavier than grief. It hung on the rusty nail by the mudroom door, the corduroy one Dad wore to mend fences and stand against November wind. After the lawyer read the will, and my name floated there like a ghost that never learned to speak, I drove back to the farm half numb, half burning, and reached for that jacket as if it were a hand. The mudroom smelled like rain-soaked hay and old coffee. Dust motes swam in a bar of afternoon light, slow as cattle crossing. Mom had boxed up most things, but she left this, like a small, stubborn memory. I slid my arms through the sleeves. The lining rasped my skin. The left pocket resisted, then gave. My fingers brushed a fold, papery and stiff, hidden behind a loose stitch. I eased out an envelope creased by years and sweat. No stamp. My father's blocky handwriting, to my boy, when I don't know how to say it. My throat tightened hard enough to bruise. For a long minute I listened to the house settle, to sparrows in the eaves, to the refrigerator's tired hum. Then I opened it. A single page, written on the back of a feed invoice, wavered in my hands. The ink had bled in places, like it had rained inside the words. I started reading, and the room shifted, the way fields change color when clouds move. It spoke of debts and doubt and a pride that soured into distance. It spoke of the day we fought by the south pasture, and why he couldn't meet my eyes after. By the last line, the will felt smaller than a seed. The letter wasn't mailed, but it had finally arrived. I folded it back into place. I read the letter again until the edges warmed in my hands, then slid it into the inner pocket like a heartbeat. Outside, the gravel driveway remembered the lawyer's tires, pale scars leading to the road. I walked the perimeter out of habit, touching gates, testing latches, as if the farm might answer a question the house refused. The letter mentioned numbers without naming them, the kind of debt that turns a man into a weather report, always scanning horizons for storms. He wrote about a drought year I tried to forget, when we sold half the herd and he sold part of himself. He wrote pride is a fence with barbed wire on both sides. I thought of the will and tasted iron. Mom was at the kitchen table sorting papers into piles. She looked up, eyes rimmed pink from sleep she hadn't had. "Coffee's warm," she said, voice steady like a fence post. I poured a cup and kept the letter hidden, not from her, but from the old pattern between us. Silences stacked like hay bales. I asked where Dad kept the seed records the year Creek ran thin. She nodded toward the pantry. "Top shelf, green ledger." I climbed the stool, found the ledger, and a torn feed invoice that matched the letter's watermark. My pulse kicked. Indentations on the next page, grooves where a pen had pressed hard. I angled the paper to the light. The grooves traced words my father had written and then torn away. Land swap, south pasture, Bennett. That last name moved through me like cold water. Bennett had been Dad's friend until money spoke louder. If there was a deal, it would be on paper somewhere men thought no one would look. I finished the coffee and took the jacket to the barn. The barn breathed dust and hay when I slid the big door open. Swallows stitched quick shadows under the rafters, and a shaft of light fell across the workbench like a question. I hung the jacket on a nail, laid the letter flat beside the vise, and let the quiet sort through me. Somewhere between wood and oil lived the version of my father who taught me knots. I opened drawers he'd labeled in fading marker, hinges, cotter pins, baling twine. At the back of the lowest drawer, under a curled calendar girl from 1989, I found a metal index box. It clicked stubbornly, then gave. Inside were envelopes marked by seasons instead of years. Spring, calving, drought, each stuffed with receipts and notes. I worked through drought, torn invoices, seed slips, fuel chits brittle as onion skin. One envelope hid a Polaroid of the south pasture stake line, the creek in a thin ribbon, Dad's boot toe in frame like an accidental signature. Tucked behind it was a photocopy of a hand-drawn map with arrows toward the cottonwoods and an X by the loading chute. In the margin, "Swap starts here." Another note, single word, "Bennett." The name made my jaw set. I remembered the afternoon Dad and I shouted across the fence, how he said, "Trust me," and I heard, "Don't ask." Maybe the will was the cost of a promise I never saw him make. I folded the map and slid it into the jacket's inner pocket with the letter, their corners touching like two pieces that might fit. From the loft ladder, I could see sunlight warming the south slope beyond the doors. The X waited out there, patient as earth. I took a breath that tasted like hay and metal and decided to go find it. I cut across the yard and followed the two-track past the granary. Grass hissed against my jeans. The cottonwoods gathered ahead like old men at a courthouse, whispering. I kept my eyes on the ground for survey stakes, beer can tabs, any sign of a bargain made. The creek murmured thinly, a ribbon of brown glass. By the loading chute, the soil turned stubborn. I crouched where the map's arrows converged and brushed back crusted clay. A rusted T-post leaned like a tired sentinel. Something caught the light, an edge of galvanized metal, not fence, not rock. I dug with a stick first, then a flat stone, quickening when the outline squared up. It was a tin strongbox the size of a book, mottled with rust blooms. The latch had fused. My pocket knife argued with it until the blade surrendered a notch. The lid creaked open on dirt-packed hinges, exhaling a smell like wet pennies and time. Inside lay a folded survey plat, a carbon copy receipt stamped paid, and a single-page agreement with two signatures I knew too well, my father's and Bennett's. The language was blunt as a crowbar. Temporary transfer of grazing rights on the South 40 in exchange for immediate cash-to-service operating debt. Reversion upon repayment by December 31st. My chest tightened at a date 5 winters behind us. Paper-clipped to the agreement was a yellow sticky note, sun-faded and stubborn. For my boy, when he's ready to ask why. I sat back on my heels and let the creek answer for a while. The will hadn't been punishment. It had been collateral. Dad traded what he thought he had to keep the farm breathing. Pride made him hide the sacrifice. I slid the papers into the jacket and stood, already hearing gravel crunching in the driveway. Gravel whispered like rain over tin as a truck slowed near the porch. I wiped rust from my palms on my jeans and walked back, heart keeping a rancher's pace, steady until a gate sticks. Bennett climbed from an old blue pickup I knew from auctions. He wore the same brim, the same careful smile men wear when they mean it's only business. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. He looked past me toward the barn as if the walls could testify. "Heard about your dad," he answered, voice smooth as creek stones. "Figured I'd pay respects." Respect had a price on our road. I kept my hands in my pockets so he couldn't see them shake. On the porch, Mom appeared with a dish towel in her fist. She nodded once, a courtesy she would have offered a storm. We sat at the picnic table. Bennett made small talk about rain, diesel, the neighbor's combine. I let the silence do arithmetic. When he finally leaned in, his breath smelled of wintergreen. "Your dad and I had arrangements," he said. "There's paperwork that might be confusing." "I've been confused before," I said, "but I learn slow and thorough." He watched me the way a man watches a horse test a fence. "If anything turns up, it belongs with me," he said softly. "Would save everyone trouble." The letter pressed warm against my ribs. The strongbox papers felt heavier than the table's boards. I thought of the map's X and the sticky note's dare. "If anything turns up, we'll let the lawyer sort it," I said. Bennett's smile thinned. He rose, tipped his hat, and left a card on the table like a coin on a grave. When his truck's dust settled, the yard looked exactly the same, and nothing did. The card lay between the coffee rings on the table, its gold letters catching sun like deceit made polite. Bennett Ag Holdings. The logo was new, cleaner than the man who wore it. I slipped it into my shirt pocket, not as a token, but as evidence of a wound still open. Mom stood at the screen door, drying her hands again, though they were already dry. "He wants something," she said quietly. "He always did." Inside, the house hummed with the old refrigerator's rhythm, a heartbeat older than both of us. I spread the documents from the strongbox on the kitchen table. The plat map, the receipt, the contract. The line about reversion upon repayment glared at me. Dad had meant to buy the land back but never told anyone. Maybe pride kept him quiet. Maybe he thought he'd fix it before the end came. I found the checkbook ledger in the drawer by the phone. His last entry, 3 weeks before he died, read, "Bennett partial payment." The rest of the page was blank, a cliff unfinished. I could almost hear his voice, half gravel, half regret. "You finish what you start, son." Outside, wind rattled the gutter. I went to the barn again and looked over the south fence where Green had finally pushed through winter stubble. Every fence post carried his fingerprints. The deal, the debt, the letter, each a language of a man who didn't know how to ask forgiveness. I climbed into the old tractor seat, its cushions split and sunburned, and sat until the cold crept up my back. Maybe Dad's silence had been his apology, or maybe it was a test, to see if I'd stay or if I'd sell the soil that built us. Either way, I wasn't leaving. Not yet. The next morning broke gray, the kind of sky that promised neither rain nor mercy. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in and sat at the table watching steam twist into nothing. The jacket hung on the chair beside me, letter still tucked inside. It felt alive, as if it were waiting for me to finish something Dad had started. Mom joined me, moving slower than usual. "You going to town today?" she asked. I nodded. "Need to talk to the county clerk. About the land papers?" She hesitated, then set her mug down. "Your father meant well," she said, voice trembling in the quiet. "He just didn't know how to tell you." In town, the clerk's office smelled of old paper and pencil shavings. I asked for the deed history on the South 40. The clerk, a man who remembered me from Little League, thumbed through folders until he found one thick with carbon copies. "Funny thing," he said. "Title's still in your dad's name. Bennett filed an extension, but it was never processed. Guess the old man never signed it." My pulse hitched. "So the land's ours?" I asked. He shrugged. "Technically, yeah, but if Bennett's got paperwork we don't, he'll come gunning for it." Back outside, the wind carried the smell of rain on gravel. I walked past the feed store where Dad used to talk weather like scripture. Every face I passed looked both familiar and foreign. People who'd seen me grow up and now saw me as a man trying to read a ghost. When I got home, Bennett's card was gone from the table. Mom had tucked it into the trash. "Best place for it," she said. Maybe so, but I wasn't done with Bennett yet. That night I sat on the porch, the world dimming into the soft blue that belongs only to farms and regrets. Crickets tuned up, the old barn light hummed, and every sound felt older than me. I unfolded the letter again, reading it under the porch lamp. The ink had faded more in the folds, like time erasing hesitation. One line hit me different now. "Don't judge a man by what he keeps, son, but by what he tries not to lose." The farm had always been what he tried not to lose. Maybe I was next. Headlights curved up the drive, throwing long shadows through the porch rails. A pickup I didn't recognize rolled to a stop. Bennett climbed out, but this time he wasn't smiling. "We need to talk," he said. His voice had dropped the honey. I told him he could talk from where he stood. He reached into his coat, pulled a folded paper, and held it out like a badge. "Your father owed me more than land. He used your name on the collateral, thinking you'd never know." My stomach tightened. "That's a lie." He stepped closer. "Then check your records. Loan number right there. You'll see who signed it." I snatched the paper. It was a photocopy of a loan agreement, my name typed clean across the bottom, but the signature wasn't mine. It was Dad's. His handwriting stiff from the stroke he never told anyone about. I recognized the tremor in the loops. Bennett leaned on the railing. "You give me the South 40 and we call it even." I looked past him to the fields, the house, the light in Mom's window. "No," I said quietly. "We don't call it anything yet." He stared, jaw hard, then turned and left. The dust from his tires hung in the dark like a threat. I didn't sleep. The copy of that forged loan sat on the kitchen table beside Dad's real letter, two truths arguing in silence. The farmhouse creaked with the kind of wind that finds every crack, and the ticking clock sounded like footsteps walking through years we never spoke. By dawn, I had decided, if Bennett wanted to play honest, I'd bring light to every shadow he left. At the county archives, a woman named June greeted me with the tired smile of someone who's seen too many feuds over too little dirt. "You're Tom's boy," she said, scanning my request form. "He was here often, quiet, polite, always asked about title records." She led me to the microfilm cabinet and rolled a reel until his name flickered on the screen. Loan, Lauer 2478B. My father's handwriting again, same trembling curve, same date as the supposed collateral, but the witness signature was Bennett's. June frowned. "That's irregular. He shouldn't have notarized his own deal." She printed copies and slid them to me. "This could hold in court if you push." Outside, the air smelled of rain and resolve. I called the lawyer who'd read the will. His tone changed when I explained. "If your father's signature was under duress or falsified, we can reopen probate. That land may revert entirely to you." Driving home, the field seemed wider. The jacket lay on the passenger seat, letter inside, whispering against the wind. When I pulled into the yard, Mom stood on the porch steps, hands clenched in her apron. "He came by again," she said. "Said he'll take the cattle if the papers aren't handed over." I looked at her, then at the south fence line stretching into clouded distance. "Then he's going to have to cross more than a fence this time," I said. By afternoon, the wind had turned sharp, carrying the promise of a storm, and the smell of dust unsettled. I spent the day in the barn going through Dad's old ledgers, searching for anything that could stitch truth together. Each page told a story of small victories, repairs made, calves born, debts slowly fed. And then, halfway through the final book, a check stub caught my eye. Payee, Bennett Ag Holdings, amount $5,000, memo line, final payment. The date was 1 week before Dad's heart attack. I stared at it, realizing what it meant. He had already settled the debt. Bennett wasn't owed a thing. I copied the stub, slipped it into a folder with the letter and the forged loan, and headed toward town. The sky cracked with thunder behind me. The lawyer's office lights were still on when I arrived. "This is the missing piece," I told him, spreading the papers across his desk. He read them twice, then leaned back, whistling low. "Your father tried to fix it before he went. Bennett's been holding on to a lie." We drafted a statement, signed and dated, ready for court. As I left, rain began to fall, fat drops bursting on the hood of my truck. Lightning lit the courthouse dome, and I thought about Dad working through storms just like this, patching fences, believing silence would protect me. Back at the farm, I parked by the porch. Mom stood in the doorway, hair whipped by wind. "You find what you needed?" she asked. I nodded, holding up the folder. I found what he wanted me to. Inside, I hung the jacket by the door again. For the first time, it felt light. But I knew one more storm was coming, Bennett's. And this time, I wouldn't hide from it. The storm rolled in after midnight. Thunder shook the windows, and the barn light swung on its wire like a warning. I couldn't sleep, so I sat in Dad's chair, the letter open on my lap. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat his handwriting seemed alive. Ink trembling under light, words caught between apology and confession. When the rain eased, I saw headlights crawling up the drive again. Same truck. Bennett. He killed the engine halfway and walked the rest of the way through puddles, his boots slapping mud. I opened the door before he could knock. "You need to stop coming here," I said. He didn't flinch. "You found something," he said. "Your father's records. They don't mean what you think." His tone carried a crack, part threat, part plea. I held up the folder. "This says otherwise." He stepped closer, water dripping from his hat brim. "You think a judge will care about a dead man's scribbles? I've got partners now, money, lawyers. You don't." I looked past him to the fields, silvered by lightning. "I've got truth," I said. "And I've got his name." For a long second, the storm held its breath. Then he turned, boots sinking in mud, and left without a word. His taillights disappeared into the black, but I knew it wasn't over. Men like him didn't back down. They waited for softer ground. When dawn came, the world smelled washed and new. Mom brewed coffee and said quietly, "He won't stop." I poured a cup and answered, "Neither will I." Out the window, sunlight spilled over the south pasture, bright and stubborn. Somewhere beneath that soil, Dad had buried his mistakes, but also the proof that a man could fight for what he loved, even if he lost the words to say it. By the third day, the mud had dried to cracked clay, and word of the dispute had traveled faster than the wind. Neighbors stopped at the gate pretending to offer help, but their eyes searched for gossip. The lawyer called that morning. He'd filed the injunction. Bennett was officially barred from touching the land until the court date. Still, I knew men like him didn't wait for permission. I walked the fence line anyway, the jacket slung over my shoulder. Every post told a story, his hammer marks, his sweat darkening the grain. When I reached the south pasture, I knelt and pressed my hand to the soil. "It's done, Dad," I whispered. "We're going to finish this right." That night, the yard lights blinked off one by one until only the porch lamp glowed. I was sitting there when a truck door slammed again. Bennett stood near the gate, silhouette cut by headlights. But this time he didn't move closer. He just shouted through the night, "You'll regret dragging his name through the mud!" I stood, calm as a fence post. "His name's in the soil," I said. "That's where truth grows." He cursed once, kicked the gravel, and drove off. The sound faded, leaving only frogs and wind. For the first time in months, the farm felt alive again. Inside, I hung the jacket where it belonged. The letter rested in the pocket, softer now, edges curled. I didn't need to read it anymore. I'd learned what it meant. Dad hadn't failed me. He'd trusted me to dig. When morning came, I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and watched light spill across the fields he'd fought to keep. Maybe forgiveness wasn't spoken. Maybe it was planted. And for the first time, I believed something could grow from silence. The hearing took place 2 weeks later in the county courthouse, the same red brick building where Dad once paid property taxes with cash and pride. I wore his jacket, patched at the elbow, letters still in the pocket like armor. Bennett sat across the aisle, clean suit, cold stare, his lawyers flipping folders like playing cards. When the judge asked for statements, my lawyer stood and laid the documents on the bench, the forged loan, the unfiled extension, the final payment stub. Each piece landed with a quiet thud that echoed louder than any accusation. The judge adjusted her glasses, read in silence, and looked up. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "you signed as witness and beneficiary. That's not just unethical, it's illegal." Bennett's jaw worked, but no sound came. The ruling was quick. The south pasture and all adjoining rights reverted to my family. The court fined him for falsifying documents and ordered restitution. The gavel fell like thunder, but this time it didn't scare me. It cleared the sky. Outside, sunlight caught the courthouse steps. Mom stood waiting, tears she didn't try to hide. "He'd be proud," she said. I took her hand, the same way Dad used to when storms passed. "He already is," I whispered. Back at the farm, I walked the fence one last time that evening. The cottonwoods shimmered in gold light, and the creek hummed like forgiveness. I took the letter from the pocket, read it once more, then tucked it beneath the top fence rail, his words returning to the land they saved. I turned toward the house, smoke rising from the chimney, and felt peace settle like dew. Dad's silence had ended, not in words but in the soil, the truth, and the will he never needed to write. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, write in the comments where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.